we are going to be covering in the next several months the gospel. We're going to talk about what that is and why it's important to our lives as Christians. And we're going to start in the very, very beginning of the Bible. So if you got your Bible right there, we're going to open up to the very, very first book of the Bible. It is Genesis chapter 1. A lot of times I have y'all read and stuff like that, but today I'm going to be doing most of the talking and most of the reading because I want to kind of just convey to you and get through this class relatively quickly because I'm going to be meeting with Skylar afterwards and doing some communion stuff, so I don't want to take up too terribly much time. So follow along with Genesis chapter 1. So in the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was what? What are the words that are used right there?
Formless, void.
Formless void. Okay, so there's a formless void. What else is there?
Darkness.
Darkness. Covered the face of the deep. Well, what's next?
Wind from God.
A wind from God. Now you have to understand what a wind from God is. A wind from God, a lot of times, sometimes they translate this spirit, sometimes they don't know. But what is trying to be conveyed here is the idea of a wind that is so big that you almost can't comprehend it. There was a movie that came out a long, long time ago called Twister, and it's about tornadoes. And do you know the biggest tornado that there is, the number that's on it? F what?
F5.
F5, F5 tornado. In that movie they call an F5 tornado the finger of God, because it's so big, so powerful, everything else. So what's trying to be conveyed right here is that you have this wind that is really, really powerful. So you have a void, darkness, a horrible wind, and then there's one more thing that swept over the face of the waters. So you have a void, darkness, wind, and water, and all of this stuff is swirling around. It's just going all over the place, swirling and stuff like that. So when you think about this, when you think about something dark, where there's all this stuff swirling around, and it's loud, rushing noise, and it feels like empty and stuff like that, what word might come into your mind? What would that feel like?
Abandoned?
Abandoned? Yeah, you might feel abandoned in the midst of that. All of this stuff taking place around you. The word that I like to use is chaos. It feels like chaos with all of this stuff that is just rumbling around you, going on. It's like, oh my goodness, this is horrible. So, chaos is taking place. And in the midst of this chaos, God says, let there be light. So what's the first thing God creates? Light. And God saw that the light was what? Look at your Bibles there in verse 4. The light was...
Good.
What does God call it? Good. And God separated the light from the darkness, and God called the light day, and the darkness He called night. And there was evening and there was morning the first day. What's kind of weird about that last sentence? There was evening, there was morning the first day. What's kind of weird about that?
It talks about darkness and then goes into day.
It does night and then day. How many of us think about a day that way? Do you think about days? Do you think about a day
wake up
starting?
when there's light. And then
Yeah, we think about day starting in the morning and then finishing up in the evening. But the ancient Jews thought it differently. They believed that the day started when?
during the day.
Okay, they believed that the day started at night. You know why? Because they believed God did His work at night. They believe God does His work first and does His work while we're sleeping. And then when we wake in the morning, that's when we do our work. So they believed God does His stuff at night while we rest. And then we do our stuff during the day. That's why they start. And of course, who's more important? Whose work is more important, ours or God's? Come on, whose work is more important, ours or God's? Okay, God's work is more important. And so that's why they said the day begins at night, because God does His work first. So just so you know, that's one of the things that are there. Okay, verse 6. And God said, let there be a dome in the midst of the waters, and it separate the waters from the waters. So God made the dome and separated the waters that were under the dome from the waters that were above the dome, and it was so. God called the dome sky. There was evening and there was morning the second day. So you picture water, and God puts a dome that looks, the sky looks like a dome. Now, why would they say that God separated the waters up there from the waters down here? What happens when you dig down into the ground and you dig deep enough? What do you hit?
Water.
That's right. Now, what falls from the sky?
Water.
So there's what up there?
Water.
And there's what down there?
Water.
So when the ancient people dug down, they said, oh, water. Now, did they have the technology to go down and see even further down to see, the Earth's
No.
core and lava and stuff like that?
No.
No. Did they understand about the space, outer space and stuff like that was beyond there? Did they understand all of that like we do?
Not all of it.
Not all of it. They understood some of it, but not all of it. So that was what they looked up. Okay, water up there, water, and so on and so forth. So they believed that God separated the water from above and the water from below to make the sky. And there was evening and morning the second day. And God said, let the waters under the sky be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas. And God saw that it was what? Verse
Good.
10. Good. Then God said, let the earth put forth vegetation, plants yielding seed, and the fruit trees of every kind on earth that bear fruit with the seed in it. And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, and plants yielding seed of every kind, and the trees of every kind bearing fruit with the seed in it. And God saw that it was what? What word has he used over and over? God saw that it was, verse 12.
Good.
Good. God saw that it was good. So he keeps saying it was good. And there was evening and there was morning the third day. And God said, let there be lights in the dome of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. And let them be lights in the dome of the sky to give light upon the earth. And it was so. What is God talking about there? What are the lights in the sky that separate the day from the night, and for times and seasons and stuff like that? What lights is he talking about? Stars. That's right. God is talking about the stars. And he made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. What are those?
Sun and stars.
Sun, the greater light and the lesser light.
Sun and the moon.
There you go, the sun and the moon, that's right. And the stars, God set them in the dome of the sky to give light upon the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was
Good.
good. Carter's on it, man. He sees it. He sees the pattern now. It was good. And there was evening and morning the fourth day. And God said, let the waters bring forth swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the dome of the sky. So God created the great sea monsters and every living creature that moves of every kind with which the waters swarm, and every winged bird of every kind. And after God created all the birds, God saw that it was good. Y'all need to reply together. God saw that it was
Good.
good. That's right. We're not quite there yet, Kaylee. We're almost there. God saw that the sea creatures were good. God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply and fill the waters and the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth. So what is God telling him to do right there? Be fruitful, multiply means what? He commanded the fish and the birds to do what? Be fruitful and multiply. What does that mean?
Breed.
Huh?
Breed.
Breed. Have babies. I mean, come on. Some of y'all have cows and goats and stuff like that. Y'all know what that means, right? Be fruitful and multiply. You should get that. And there was evening and there was morning the fifth day. And the next day God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures of every kind, cattle and creeping things and wild animals of the earth of every kind. And it was so. God made the wild animals on the earth of every kind, and the cattle of every kind, and everything that creeps on the ground of every kind. And God saw that it was what?
Good.
That's right, God saw that it was good. Then God said, let us make humankind in our image according to our likeness. That's a very important comment right there. Because in what image did God make humankind?
Light.
No, not in light. In whose image did God make humankind?
Himself.
Yes. God created humankind in His image. So we are created in the image of God. Every human being bears the image of God. That makes us different than all of the other creatures. We are made in His image. Then God said, let us make humankind in our image according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the wild animals of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. So what did God give us over all of the creatures? What's the word that I used? Started with a D. What is that? What was that word?
Domain.
Dominion. You know what that means? It means to be in charge of, to be over, to oversee. That means we oversee the fish, the cattle, all of those things. We're kind of, to put it in evolutionary terms, we're the top of the food chain. And we manage all of that stuff. We keep it in order. We're supposed to the word that we use a lot of times is steward. We take care of it. That is the special role that God gave to us, to have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the air and every living thing that moves upon the earth. And God said, see, I have given you every plant of the earth and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth and to every bird of the air and everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food. And it was so. God saw everything that He had made, and indeed it was what?
Good.
Try again. It wasn't just good, it was
Very good.
what?
We're on the 7th day.
Yeah, we're on the 6th day,
Yeah,
actually.
6th day.
The
So
6th
very
day.
good.
Very good, that's right, Kaylee. Verse 31. God looked at everything that He had made, and indeed it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the 6th day. Now, what I was taught, and one of the things that you need to be aware of, is that the word in Hebrew for good is tov, T-O-V. And not only does it mean good, it also kind of has a meaning of it fits. So one of the things you can picture is God as He's creating. He does something, then He stands back and He says, it fits. And He goes back to work and He does some more, and He stands back and He says, it fits. He does that all throughout creation until the very, very last day. And on the very last day, after He finishes all of creation, light, darkness, the sun, the moon, the stars, the plants, the animals, the land, the seas, He says, it fits perfectly. Okay? So, what word did I start off with when I talked about the waters and the wind and the darkness and the void? What was the word that I used? Started with a C. What was that word? Do you remember? Or have you forgotten already? Remember? Chaos. God started with chaos, and then He moved to it fits perfectly. Why is that important? Now, even at your age, have you ever felt like your life has been in chaos? Yes or no? You ever felt that way? Like, holy cow, what's going to happen next? So, if things began with chaos and they ended up where it fits perfectly, what does God work to do? Yeah, God takes our chaos, and sometimes even when we can't see it, what do you think He is actively doing? Trying to make everything perfect, trying to make everything come together and fit. So God is the God who takes chaos and makes everything fit. That's one of the first lessons that the Bible is trying to tell us, that God takes chaos and makes it fit perfectly. So it's something that we need to remember about the God we serve. So let's finish up the rest of this portion of the scripture. Turn the page and we're going to go to Genesis 2. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished in all their multitude, and on the seventh day God finished the work that He had done. And what did He do on the seventh day?
Rested.
He rested from all the work that He had done. So God blessed the seventh day and He hallowed it. What does it mean to hallow? Do you have any idea? I'm going to hallow this chair right here.
Move.
What did I do to it?
Move
I moved it and I did what? I put it what?
it away.
Away.
I put it apart. I separated it. I made it different than all the other chairs. All the other chairs are up at the table. This one is set apart. So to hallow something, to make something holy, means to set it apart. So God took the seventh day and set it apart because He rested from all the work that He had done in creation. And so what He's saying there is, okay, if the God of the universe who created everything needed to rest, if God needed to rest, do you think we do?
Yes.
Now, does our society try to rest?
No.
You think about businesses and everything else, when are they open?
All 24/7, all week long.
All the time. They don't rest. If you don't rest, what do you think is going to happen?
You're gonna get tired.
You're gonna get stressed out.
Tired, stressed out, overwhelmed. Rest is something that God has tried to instill in His people so that we don't burn out, that we don't, kind of have things fall apart. Rest is very, very necessary. So one of the things that we do as Christians, as people, is practice what's called a Sabbath. That's a day of rest. And what we will learn about, if you haven't already, is that this is a day dedicated to God. And His worship. God rested on the seventh day. We rest and we dedicate it to God in His worship, because in our worship we are re-energized, we are refilled with His Spirit. So that's why we set aside a day of rest for church and everything else like that. It comes right there from the Bible. Okay, does anybody have any questions on what I've covered in this so far?
No.
Okay. Now this is the opening story of the Bible, and there's some good news there. The good news is that God takes chaos and brings together things that fit, makes things work perfectly. That's good news, but it is not the gospel. Now, the gospel comes from the Greek word evangelion. That's a Greek word right there, which literally translated means the good news. Now, like I said, it is good news that God takes chaos and makes it fit perfectly. Incidentally, let's look at the Bible really, really quick, because this is the point that I want you to learn And I want you to know beyond a shadow of a doubt. Open it to Genesis 1. Genesis 1, verse 1. Let's look at that sentence again. In the beginning, who?
God.
In the beginning, God. Who is this book about?
God.
Do you see your name at the very beginning there?
No.
Do you see people at the very beginning there?
No.
Who is this book about?
God.
This book is about God. Now, do we find, stuff about people in here? How people act and stuff like that? Yes, we do. But is it primarily about people?
No.
No, it is primarily about God. This book was written to be about God. It's about Him revealing Himself to us. And that's another very, very important thing that we need to understand. The Bible is about God and His revelation to us. Now, there are some people who say that revelation is not an appropriate way of gaining knowledge. That revelation is, it's about God and stuff like that. You can't test it scientifically. You can't know this kind of stuff. But I'm going to show you real quick why revelation is important. Because I want you to take a good look at me. Just look at me. Okay? Just look and observe me and see what I'm doing. And then tell me what my favorite color is. What?
Blue.
Blue? You have no idea, do you?
No.
Skylar? No clue.
Purple.
Purple? Blue? You have no clue. My kids know me, so they have an inside advantage. But blue is my favorite color. But just looking at me, you would never know that, would you?
Mm-mm.
I would have to tell you, right?
Yes.
And so by my telling you, I have just revealed to you who I am. I have just given you some revelation. When you're in a relationship with someone, you can't know them without them revealing stuff to you. I mean, you can see what I do on the outside, but do you know what's going on in my heart or in my head?
No.
Absolutely not. In order to know somebody's heart or somebody's head, they have to reveal things to you. And so revelation is a very, very important thing because we believe that in this Bible, God reveals Himself to us. So this Bible is much more than just a simple book. It is the story of who God is, what God has done. And if you really, really want to know who God is, guess where you have to turn? Guess what you have to read? Your Bible. Because do all sorts of people have all kinds of ideas about God?
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's a wonderful little story. It's one that you may come across eventually. And I am not a good artist, so this is going to look really, really goofy, but I don't care. A story about these blind guys. They're walking through the jungle, and they come across
I thought she's pretty good.
It's all right. It could be a lot better, but that's all right. I'm not a great artist, but we'll live. I should get Kira up here because she's a whole lot better than I am. But that, you know what that is. You see what that is, right?
Elephant.
That's an elephant. So these blind guys are walking through the jungle and they come upon this elephant, and they want to figure out what this kind of creature is. They've never heard of one of these before, so they all start feeling it. So one guy goes and he touches the torso over here. What do you think he thought the elephant was like?
Leather.
He thought it was like a wall, man, because it's a big old side right here. So he thinks it's like a wall. The other one touches his foot. Guess what he thinks the elephant is like? What looks like an elephant's leg?
Pillar.
A pillar? Yeah, that'd be a good idea. A pillar or a tree,
A
something
pole.
like that. So he thinks, okay, it's like a pillar. It's like a tree. So Another one grabs his tail. What do you think he thought it was like?
An elephant running away.
That's pretty good, Cardi. He thought it was like a rope. So, one guy thinks it's like a wall, the other one thinks it's like a tree trunk or a pillar, the next one thinks it's a rope. One touches the tip of his tusk. What does he think? He thinks it's like?
A knife?
Like a knife or a spear. Yeah, that's what he thought it was, like a spear. And so they're all touching the elephant in these different parts, and then afterwards they start arguing. And one says, no, the elephant's like a wall, broad, and there's no, it's like a stump or a pillar, it's all round, and no, it's like a rope, no, it's like a spear, and they're all arguing with him.
Isn't it
Now-
making noises?
Do what?
Doesn't it make noises?
It could make, if blowing through the trunk it could, but, but here's the question though, which one of those blind guys were right?
None.
Well, none of them were all right, but in one way were they all right? None of them.
Yes.
Yeah, because they're all kind of right and all kind of wrong, right? So in some ways, they were all right, they were all wrong, and some people say, well, that's the way it is with religion. Some people, when they think about God, some people have these different parts, and they have different parts of the truth, but none of them has the full truth. But here's the thing. What if the elephant could talk?
Oh.
And what if he could say, I am an elephant?
You put Ian.
Huh?
Oh,
Who's an elephant?
No, but what if the elephant could talk? What if the elephant could speak and tell those blind guys what he was like?
I'm wrong.
Do you think those blind guys would have a better understanding of who he is?
Yeah.
That's right. Now we believe that God did speak. We believe that God talked. And we believe that his words are recorded in this book. So if you want to know who God is about, what God is like, turn to this book. Now here's the interesting part. Here's the interesting part. You can say, okay, other religions think the same thing. They have their holy books and stuff like that. Now all the other religions believe that God spoke to one person, and that one person spoke and wrote down their books. Okay? That's what the other religions believe, that God spoke to one person, and that person then wrote the books. We believe that God came down himself in Jesus. And Jesus spoke what God is like. That's a big difference between us and all the other religions. We believe that God talked to us directly. Did not use a mediator, but God talked to us directly, which is really, really, really important. And why we turn to the Bible. The Bible is God's record of revelation. And why did he talk to us? We'd be blind. We wouldn't know him. He's got to share his heart and his mind with us. I had that backwards, by the way. His heart and his mind. He has to share it with us. So when he shares it with us, that's how we come to know him. When he tells us these things. All right? And it's really, really interesting. Let's go back. How does God do things? What does God, what is God all about? And when we talked about how God operates, when we talked about how he began creating, what did he do? What was the first thing God did? All the chaos was going in, and God then what?
Made it peaceful.
How? How did he do it? Did he take hammer and nails and stuff?
No.
How did he do it? With what?
He spoke.
Say it, Skylar.
His
You're right.
mouth.
His mouth. He spoke. All he did was speak. He spoke things into existence. He's that powerful that he was able to speak things into existence. And he's a God who communicates. He's a God who speaks. He is not silent. Does God continue to speak today? Yes or no?
Yes.
It's tough to hear him sometimes, isn't it? But God does speak today. We believe that God continues to talk to us. Now, there's a couple of things that need to be talked about in the midst of things, because as you grow in your education and go through things, you'll take science classes, and science is really cool. I love science. I love participating in science. But you'll get some people who say that science and God are not compatible. That the story that we just told about creation is not compatible with science. They don't work together. You can't have God and science. Don't believe them. That's not the case.
Didn't God create science?
Well, yeah. Well, we believe that because the world is ordered, that we find order in the world, that we can actually do science. And there have been a lot of people. I mean, the vast majority of scientists, kind of up until now, have been people who believed in God. Science owes its roots to the belief in God. And so, when we look at these stories, we have to remember two things. Number one, did these folks have the technology that we have today?
No.
No. So, if God went down there and started talking to them about quantum mechanics, do any of you know what quantum mechanics is? I would bore you to tears, right? So if God went and started talking to them about quantum mechanics, do you think they would have gotten it?
No.
No, because you wouldn't get it either, right? Because you have no idea what it's all about. Those guys had no idea what it was all about either, so they weren't going to get it. So God speaks to us in the way that we will understand it. So that's the first thing we have to remember. God speaks to us in the way that we understand it. The second thing is that even when He speaks to us as we understand it, and reveals things to us, you know, it's still going to be pretty compatible with what we know. Because what was the first thing God created? Mom, what was the first thing? Brooke, what was it?
There was light.
Light. There was light. Okay, light was the first thing that God created. Now, how was the universe formed? What was the event that we talked about? What was the event that kicked it all off? Remember, Carter? Have you learned about
The Big Bang.
the Big Bang? Any of y'all learned about that yet?
Yes.
Okay, you learned about the Big Bang when all of the concentrated matter of the universe was all in one little place, and then it blew up and the universe began expanding. Guess what the universe was like at the explosion?
Chaos.
It was dark.
Wait, was it still chaos?
It was
though?
dark. It was chaos. Yeah, it was dark. There was darkness. And the universe began expanding. And then, a couple of thousand years into its expansion, guess what erupted? I mean, it wasn't 1,000 years, maybe it was a little less time than that. But what was the first thing that emerged all of a sudden in one big instance?
A bright light.
A bright light. So what was the first thing that happened in the universe after the Big Bang?
Light.
Light. What does Scripture say was the first thing that happened in the creation of the universe?
Light.
Pretty neat, isn't it? Don't think that they're incompatible. They are.
Was Big Bang like a planet or something?
No, it was just all the matter of the universe was in this dot that they think was just tiny. It just erupted all of a sudden. See, the Bible is meant to tell us who, which is God, and what He did, not necessarily how. God reveals Himself as much as He can, but it's meant to tell us who and what. So God created the world light, and that was the thing. So remember that, you know, when things come about and people try to tell you, I mean, we can't do science and faith together. Yes, we can. We very much can. All right, I covered the Hebrew word for good. I told you what it meant. The other thing that you will get with this science stuff is revolving around the word day. Some people believe that in the Scriptures that day here is equal to 24 hours. And so that God created all of the universe in 6 24-hour periods. But we also know as we read through the Scriptures that day is flexible. It does not always mean 24 hours. The psalmist writes, one day in your sight is like 1,000 years. So does day necessarily have to be 24 hours? No, it doesn't. So this could be happening over thousands, millions, even billions of years. So don't let anybody tell you that this is just 7 exact days, that that's when it happened. No, there's a lot of flexibility in there. It could mean millions upon millions of years that God was in the creative process. So don't let anybody tell you that science and faith are not compatible. They certainly are. Now, the responsibility that God gave to humankind, I told you, was to have dominion or stewardship over the world. We know that. So all of that is encapsulated in the Bible story. So all of that you need to know as we move forward. And now the final couple of questions. And these go back to gospel. I told you it was a Greek word, evangelion, which meant what? What does that mean? What does gospel mean? What are the 2 words I used? What does gospel mean? Avery, you remember?
Feel like if I.
The good news.
Good news.
Oh,
There we go. Thank you
I
for it.
couldn't remember it was up there on the board.
Now, is it good news that God takes chaos and brings about where things fit? Is that good news? That God takes chaos and makes things fit?
Yes.
Absolutely, it's good news. That's the good news of the Bible, chapter 1. The good news of chapter 1 is that God takes chaos and makes it fit. Now, why is that not the good news? Because we have the good news, which is the gospel. Why isn't that God takes chaos and making it fit the good news? I want you to think about the world today. I want you to think about everything that goes on in the world today. Does everything fit in our world today?
Not all of it.
No, it doesn't, does it? God created it to fit, to all be good. Is everything in the world good? What are some things that are not good? What are some things that are not good?
Like,
Slavery.
Slavery's not good.
like, what's it called? I
Robbers.
know what it's called.
Robbers.
Trees.
I know, like not equal equality.
Oh, okay, yeah, inequality.
That's not
Adultery.
Adultery.
Kidnapping.
Kidnapping.
Shootings.
Shootings. What else? What are some other things?
Abuse.
Abuse. Well, war good or not?
No.
What else?
Fires.
Fires. What about that big old storm that dropped all that rain in North Carolina and stuff like that? Was that good for those people? No. So we have some natural disasters.
What about devil?
Huh?
Devil. Would that be one?
We'll get to that before we get to devil in the presence of evil. So there's all this stuff that happens that is not good. So if there's still things that are happening that are not good, something went wrong here, right? If God created everything and it fit to begin with, something is not right because things aren't fitting now, right? Things are not perfect in the world now, are they?
Because.
So, even though God takes chaos and brings the good, this is not the gospel because there are still things happening that are not good. And next month, we're going to get together and figure out why these things are happening. And we're going to figure out what the good news is in the next couple of chapters. All right?